You know, people in many different movements seem to be waiting for President Obama's second term, hoping that he's going to find his voice, find his spine, some people put it, find a way out from under the pressure that he's under. I hope for that on a bunch of different issues. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think when we look at the question of the Obama policy on the Middle East in general, certainly including Israel-Palestine, it's not surprising that the president and his campaign brags about being closer friends of Israel than any administration in the past. And they can point to some very specific things involving the amount of military aid, the protection of Israel in the United Nations, etc. Now, if you look at the rhetoric of both campaigns, both are trying very hard to position themselves as the best friend of Israel. The Romney campaign has claimed that Obama, quote, threw Israel under a bus. I don't know where that comes off when you're talking about an administration that has provided more military aid to Israel than any other in history. What there has been is a slight distinction at various times, it's not all the time, in how the various campaigns speak about the U.S. relationship with Israel. There was a moment when, in the summer of 2010, when President Obama, not as candidate Obama, over time made several requests, very firm requests of the Israelis to stop a particular violation of international law. It was never described in that term, but there was a request to stop building new settlements, stop expanding settlements. The request was, please freeze settlements. And it was made over and over again. Please freeze settlements. Please freeze settlements. And the Israeli answer was no. Now, if there had been real pressure, what we would have seen was a response to that answer that says, oh, okay, you're an independent country, you can do what you want, but you know that $30 billion we promised you? You can kiss that goodbye. And you know how we protect you in the United Nations so that you're never actually held accountable for your violations? We're not doing that anymore. That's the beginning of what pressure looks like. We never saw anything close to that. What we saw was a series of requests, answer no, and then the request stopped. That was what was targeted by President Obama's political opponents as evidence of throwing Israel under a bus. Not my definition of any kind of a bus I've ever seen. So I think that we have to be very clear. Now, what President Romney would do, according to candidate Romney, is provide massive amounts of military aid to Israel. Both sides want to do that. There is one significant difference, which is a policy difference that's quite important. Candidate Romney, when he visited Israel in the summer of 2012, said that he would accept and respect Israel's decision regarding its relationship with Iran and its willingness to use military force. He went on, however, to say not only would he respect Israel's position, but that he would also agree with what amounted to an acceptance of the Israeli red line on Iran, which is quite different than the Obama administration's red line and what has traditionally been the U.S. red line. Now, in my view, any red line that says that act would make it okay to use force against Iran is a disaster. It's a guarantee of failure of diplomacy. It ensures that diplomacy will not be taken seriously. It threatens massive instability in the region. Before you even start with the question of the impact of the massive number of civilian casualties in Iran, the possibilities of the threat to the oil industry, etc. So even aside from all that, there is a massive difference between the two positions on what constitutes a red line. For the Romney campaign, like for Israel, the red line is Iran's alleged nuclear capacity. Nuclear capacity has never been defined in international law. It's widely understood in the context of nuclear weapons to include some version of they have access to enriched uranium, and they have the scientific know-how, and they have the capacity for enrichment. Iran has all that. So does every country that has a viable nuclear power program, like Iran has. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. But by saying that the red line is not a nuclear weapon, but nuclear capacity. Israel and candidate Romney have made clear that their red line is much closer. It could be today, rather than the Obama administration red line, which is still very, very dangerous, that says we would use force to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, from having a nuclear weapon. That's way years down the line. So red lines are a huge problem. But if you're going to have red lines, having one right here is way more dangerous than one that's over here.